All right. Hey, everybody. We're live. Hey, Andy. How's it going, man?
Doing well, man. How are you?
Doing good. We got a great show today. I'm really excited. We've had a lot of people coming in and joining. I've seen the numbers on YouTube going up. I'm sure the LinkedIn numbers are growing as well. But welcome everybody. It seems that we've got an exciting topic today. So let us know in the chat where you're watching from. And I'm ready to talk Copilot, man. It's almost here. I can feel it.
Yeah, this one's going to be really exciting. I'm glad there's a lot of people that are really interested in this. I've been living in the Copilot world for a while now, mentally since it was announced, hands-on with it
Hmm.
here for the last little bit, learning a lot, excited to share a lot of that with the community, but also if you're out there and you are working with it or you're really curious about it, let us know in
Hmm.
all the various chats, whether you're on YouTube or LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever you're coming from. Let us know what you think about it, what you're excited to try out with it, what you've learned from it. We're all here to share, and we're just as excited to learn from all of you as we are to share what we've learned here coming up.
Yeah. We've been Andy and I, so we're in the early access program. We've both been using Copilot since August, September timeframe. And what we're hoping to do today is more kind of be like your all-in-one, one-stop shop guide to what to expect with Copilot, kind of, what's going to be available starting in November, what's part of that general availability, what they call GA. You'll see the term GA thrown around a lot. That's general availability. What is actually going to launch and what are we expecting to see? Um, we can't do demos yet because it's not actually GA, but with some experience in the background, we're hoping to basically collate all of the resources that have been out there. There's tons of blog posts, tons of videos, Andy, that we're going to show that they've been scattered, and we thought if we could bring everything together and kind of have like a co-pilot pre-launch party, basically, maybe this could be a resource for those that are looking to just get end to end what can I expect in November, and then we can revisit again later on whenever we can actually live demo and get into like the tips and tricks and things like that. I see Daryl, you said you're gonna have to add chapters. I think we're definitely going to add chapters to this, and what we want to do as well is we want to cut this up into short videos or clips of some sort so that we can release them that way. So you'll probably see between the sections, I think, Andy, you want to do some type of, like, welcome to 365 Deep Dive. We want to talk about Word now. We want to talk about Excel. We we might do a little bit of an intro into each area. That way we can cut it up easier for you, so that you don't have to watch a 2-hour video if you don't want to later on. So,
Or you can watch a 2 hour video with chapters and you can put
yep.
it at double speed if you need, and you can get to the part that you're really interested in. But I think you set the expectations pretty well. We are approaching this from a information worker, fingers to the keyboard type level. If you've been with us before, and many of you have, we did a deep dive just a couple of months ago with Microsoft's Jeremy Chapman, where we talked about the Copilot service, how it operates, the ins and outs, like behind the scenes, what IT administrators need to do to prepare for Copilot, considerations for security and privacy and so forth.
Hmm.
This is not going to be that deep dive. This is the deep dive where we want to set end user expectations. We want to really help you to understand what you can do with Copilot,
Hmm.
and to help you to temper your expectations to a certain point, but also to show you that this is going to fundamentally change the modern workplace. Because in the short time that we've had it, I think we can both agree that it is game changing. And I don't like to use that word, that phrase loosely, but this is a significant leap forward in the way that an information worker can work day to day. And I'm really excited to dive into it.
Yeah, I think the next 6 months or so are going to be very exciting as we all start to realize kind of that art of the possible and what, connecting the capabilities with the needs that maybe we didn't even know we had. We were doing this kind of drudgery of work stuff and didn't even really consider it drudgery until we have a tool that can help with it. I think everybody's going to be, having a new perspective on things. I think over the next like year or so, it's going to be pretty exciting to be in IT. So
Really, really agree with
yeah,
that.
awesome. Well, let's dive right into it. No pun intended. Microsoft 365 Copilot. What is it? What makes it up? We're gonna just like very quickly do an overview, kind of a reintroduction for those of you who haven't heard of Microsoft 365 Copilot. I don't know who hasn't at this point, but at the very basic level, it's three main components, right? It's bringing these large language models or generative AI built on the open AI version of large language models. It's the data that you have access to in the Microsoft Graph. So Microsoft Graph, if you're not familiar with it, is not only all of the data that you've got, like your files, your emails, your chats, those types of things, but also the connectivity between that data, the kind of common threads through it, who you work with, who you share files with, and the collaboration, who's worked on what at what point. All of that culminates into the Microsoft Graph, and those connections will inform what goes into and comes out of that large language model. And then it's built into our Microsoft 365 app. So rather than having to switch contexts all the time and go to Chat GPT or go to Bard or something like that, you'll be able to invoke it inside the app that you're already working in. So that it makes it not out of the way to go do what you want to do. So these are the applications that they initially announced: is Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Teams. It's actually grown beyond that since the early access program started. So what we can expect whenever this launches is also OneNote and also M365 Chat, which is um, your chat assistant that you can access through your browser, through Bing.com or through the sidebar. It's also Microsoft Loop and being able to invoke it inside of Loop components with using the / command. It's also Whiteboard. So there's about 7 or 8 different endpoints now at launch as we get. So you can see that it's already starting to mature before our eyes before it's even publicly available. So that's really exciting. So all of this culminates, all this news and everything has landed us to this point, late October. November 1st is when Microsoft has announced general availability. And Andy, I don't know if you've heard, like, what does that mean specifically? What can we do on November 1st? I think it's a little bit unclear, right? Like, I think we're going to be able to purchase licenses probably, but do you think, like, are the provisioning of the tenants, things like that? Have you heard anything what to expect in your organization?
So, from what I understand, on November 1st, Copilot is going to be available for the enterprise enterprises that are not in the early access program. They're going to be able to go through their Microsoft partners. They're going to be able to purchase Copilot licenses
Mm-hmm.
for their workforce, and then they're going to be able to start rolling out and implementing Copilot for that organization. That being said, just a couple of prerequisites there. If you're an enterprise organization, you're going to need, I believe it's M365 E3 or E5 licensing,
Mm-hmm.
and then the Copilot license on top of that. The Copilot license is an additional $30 per user per month,
Mm-hmm.
um, on top of whatever the E3 or E5 licensing cost is. So you're going to be able to purchase those for your enterprise organization. That being said, if you haven't taken a look at the documentation on data privacy and security and some of the information on how to prepare your infrastructure and your organization for Copilot, I would recommend that you do those things before you purchase the license and set this thing free in your organization.
Hmm.
Uh, you want to make sure that users have access to just enough information to do the work that they need to do, and that you're not oversharing. And oversharing, I think, is the one concern that a lot of organizations have, especially when you're introducing things like a generative AI into the equation. So, with that in mind, get ready for it. Test it in small pilot groups, because there are a lot of lessons learned. I know you and I, John, we've compared notes. Some of the things that like we've learned, and like um, our
Hmm.
organizations are pretty mature in the Microsoft apps and services, and you and I, from an IT pro standpoint, we've been doing this for years. There's a big learning curve here, I think, for rolling this out, but also from the end user
Hmm.
perspective, setting expectations and like what to do. So even though it goes GA on November 1st, and that's the starting point for a lot of organizations, you still want to take a piloted approach to this before you deploy it to the masses. And you really
Hmm.
do need to spend some time working on your user adoption and really understanding the use case around that.
Yeah. So, a great question from Daryl here. Isn't it 120 grand additional or annual commitment upfront? That is correct. So, when Andy says, yeah, it's $30 per month on top of your E3 or your E5, that is, you need a minimum of 300, right? So, this is for organizations that have more than 300 seats. Um, I haven't heard one way or another. I'm just going to speculate wildly at this point. I believe that that is, there's a cost up front, right? That needs to stand up this instance of the LLM for your organization. And I think that Microsoft is just, the scale needs to be minimum of 300 to make that cost work out. That's from my own perspective. I haven't heard either way, but that would be what I assume the situation is, that has that minimum of 300 users. Um, it, it's difficult for us as well as MVPs, because like we're both in organizations that have more than 300. I mean, there's like 400,000 people in my organization. Andy's like 160,000 and growing or something like that. So
200,
we have that, but
200,000.
I can't demo. I'm not going to demo out of my EY environment, obviously. And so it's a little bit difficult. Like you're going to see a lot of us MVPs try to figure out like, how are we going to show this stuff off? Because I don't have 300 seats in my demo tenant to have a safe area. So we're going to have some interesting times as we launch here, but 300 is that minimum. Yeah, it makes it difficult to safely show off the content, but we'll get there. I'm sure Microsoft will figure out a way for people to show it off and demo it in different situations. Um, but yeah, if you're looking to prepare for the November date, after the November date even, and like get yourself ready for Copilot, get your organization ready, there is lots of information on learn.microsoft.com, the actual documentation for what you need to think about to prepare. There's a great Microsoft mechanics video that Jeremy Chapman and them published that has step by step. And if you want long form version of that, we were fortunate enough to have Jeremy on with us about 3 months ago or 4 months ago to talk about preparing your organization. So on our channels as well, you can go back and see what we deep dived about how to prepare and get ready for it. But let's I think get out of the admin level and back up to the user
Yeah.
level to talk about what is possible and what's going to happen whenever you get your license provisioned. So these are this is the start of us collating the data for you, gathering it all together, and I've put together these summary slides, and I've only got I think two of them that explain at the very beginning what Copilot is going to do. I've prepared these for my organization. I've taken a lot of the detail out of it to make it not quite such an eye chart. But essentially, there are 7 different endpoints or 8 different endpoints if you count M365 Chat. And across the board, if you could think about a common thread between these, we're going to look at each one individually. But across all of them, there's two main themes that have kind of surfaced for me in my experience of using these tools. And that is you can use Copilot out of the gate to consume content, and you can use Copilot to help you create content. So that's the way I've been kind of thinking about it is, am I in a consumption mode? Am I in a content creation mode whenever I'm using Copilot in my own world? So with Teams, that's in three different categories from what we have used so far. There's the M365 Chat inside of Teams. I find that I use Copilot in Teams the vast majority of the time compared to in the other endpoints because I happen to have Teams up on my screen the majority of the day, right? And I'm not switching contexts. So M365 Chat, that surfaces for you as sort of a chat bot. It is a bot that you will discuss and have conversations with. It's installed as a Microsoft Teams application, and then you just chat with it like you've been chatting with any other Teams app. It's called M365 Chat, unlocks all of that functionality where you can get executive summaries, generate key actions, ideate with it, talk back and forth, have a very conversational experience. It's also in Microsoft Teams as a group chat or a one-on-one chat helper. And we'll talk about this in the deep dive into Teams, but you can get context and ask about a specific conversation that you're having. And then what we've seen the most demos of inside of meetings, you can supercharge your ability in a meeting if you're transcribing it by invoking Copilot within the meeting. And we got lots of like videos and little nuggets of information there. With Outlook, it really falls into that normal, consume, create type of workflow. You're consuming email, which means you're able to summarize an email thread. You get dumped into a large email thread, you can catch up on it. Or you're writing an email, you can get Copilot to help you draft and also coach you a little bit in like your tone and your professionalism and things like that. Same thing with Excel. You can analyze the data, you can consume and pull insights, but then you can also take that data and visualize it or turn it into pivot tables, things like that. So again, you're creating something within Excel. Same story with Word, summarizing documents, helping you draft and write documents, help you summarize and ask questions of slide decks, help you again draft slides. It's a good starting point to kind of start out with some slides that have content on it. It may not be 100% accurate all the time or the way you would have worded it, but it's a good place to start whenever you're in PowerPoint. So that's kind of the base functionality within M365, the traditional apps of Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Moving out to some of these kind of mocha apps, right, or modern collaboration type of apps. Inside of OneNote, same deal. You're either summarizing and consuming your notes and getting insights out of like a big brain dump of notes, or you're ideating, you're creating, to-do lists or actions or, sample meeting agendas, stuff like that. Whiteboard's a little bit interesting. I think this is what we have probably the least information on, Andy. But there's three main core competencies from my experience, and that is that you can create content with your whiteboard. So I don't know where to start. I need a bunch of sticky note ideas. You can say, "Hey, Copilot, what do I need to know to, start our ice cream shop that we're going to do business planning for?" And it just gives you raw content on sticky notes. If you've got a bunch of ideation you've done and you're just literally throwing things at the virtual digital wall and you've got it all messy and unorganized, you can select those notes, you can hit categorize, and then it will find common threads within those sticky notes and give you some common themes and organize those notes for you and kind of group them together. And then one of the neatest things I think of Whiteboard with Copilot is that you can summarize a whiteboard. So if you've got this crazy complex whiteboard situation, then you can say, "Give me a summary. Like, what is this whiteboard telling me?" And it creates actually a loop component inside the whiteboard that will give you the key insights, summarize like what the whiteboard's talking about, some action items, the whiteboard that it can sense, stuff like that. And I think it's interesting. Daryl probably has a lot to say about this, but when we saw demos of this, we're like, why is it like jamming a loop component into it? And my rationalization that I've thought about as I've kind of noodled on it a while, is I think there's two main reasons. The loop component gives you a rich text area, so it can give you bullets and headers with bold text and stuff like that. The second thing is it's really powerful to use a loop component because now that is portable and I don't have to share the entire whiteboard in order to share a summary of the whiteboard. I can just share the loop component, standalone. So in my explanation or in my experience with Copilot in Whiteboard, I've actually think that it's a great thing that it tends to be a loop component, gets people exposure to that really cool tool. Same type of thing in Loop. You're either creating content, you're summarizing content. Don't want to belabor that too much. And then M365 Chat is kind of always there for you as a digital assistant. It's kind of the all-in-one capability. Whether you're using it in Microsoft Teams, in the future you will use it for in the office.com webpage. So it'll be like an application in the side menu. And then when you go to bing.com or in the Bing sidebar, you have that Copilot enabled chat assistant for you. So I guess that's everything that that I've got at a very high level before we deep dive into looking at
So
these specifically and kind of putting a visual to them.
let's
Go ahead,
step
Andy.
back one slide for just a second.
Yeah, sure.
Also,
There we
want
go.
to emphasize the order. As we're
Hmm.
approaching this and rolling it out for our users, it can be really overwhelming. And part of
Hmm.
that is because some of us have a chat GPT mentality, but some end
Hmm.
users are just trying to figure out what button to push. Where do I start? Like, where do I go? And it can vary across, roles in the organization, vary across the generations that are represented in the organization, the workflow and the type of work that they do. So as you're stepping through this, try to meet the users in the place where it's going to make the most sense for them. And I really like the order that we put this
Hmm.
particular slide in, because from what I'm seeing with some of the conversations around the users that are implementing it, is the order here, I think, is a really good order to keep in mind as you're starting to roll this out. Start
Hmm.
with Teams, because the meetings feature, to be able to have Copilot recap your meeting, to be able to pull out some key takeaways and actionable items for the meeting, that's a very low barrier for entry that
Hmm.
provides a very high return on investment for those users. They can get those detailed summaries and notes, and then they can be present in the meeting and not have to worry about scribbling everything down or going back and searching through the transcript later on. Now they can be
Hmm.
present, participate in the meeting, and then go back and have those key points and highlights and be able to talk with Copilot against the meeting later. So that's a really good entry point. The group
Yep.
chats, we use this all the time for conversation, one-on-one or small group. That extends into the meetings. So now we're just taking that Copilot into that, summarized meetings for the last 7 days. Hey, I've
Hmm.
been talking with this person. Tell me what the action items are over the last 2 weeks. That can be really helpful. Now you don't have to do that manually. And then the M365 chat. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But for me, that's really where the value of the whole thing is. That M365 chat is probably, in my opinion, the most powerful Copilot experience that we have. We'll get into
Hmm.
that more in a little bit. But
Yeah.
then as you're moving from like one app to another, we're stepping from Teams, which I think is the gateway to Microsoft 365, especially for a lot of the modern workforce, because of the fact that meetings sit side by side with conversations, sit side by side
Hmm.
with content. For a lot of information workers, Outlook is still king for communication. So to be able to
Yeah.
go into Outlook and say, okay, summarize this email thread and give me the key takeaways, because I'm not reading all that. It's too long, didn't read. That's super, super helpful. And then you start moving into the Office applications, Excel, Word, PowerPoint. And that's where you're going to really start to hit home with people in certain processes. If I'm in data analytics, Excel, here's the things that you're going to be able to do with it. And we can meet
Hmm.
them where they actually work. So the order that you have here, as I would suggest taking a look at something like this for your organization and figuring out how you're going to be able to meet those end users and show them how Copilot
Hmm.
can help them in their moment of need, and then move into other processes as they mature and get more familiar with it.
Yeah. Yeah. To highlight the question, just to answer it up front, like, what's your personal favorite way to use Copilot? For me, what I use the most is M365 Chat inside of Teams, because that's where I am for the most part. I think the most magical experience is meetings. So if you're an organization that is able to transcribe meetings and able to get the benefit of that, that is the magic. If you're going to demo this and kind of get like mind blowing functionality right off the bat. But the day to day for me is mostly Microsoft Chat because that's where I can kind of keep that conversation going and go back and forth several turns. So that's my favorite personally. What do you think, Andy? What have you been using the most? Or
The thing that I like the most is the ability to reference files that I have in OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint, whether I'm in Word, whether I'm in PowerPoint, whether I'm in
Mhm.
M365 Chat, to be able to reference those files and to be able to summarize and consolidate. One of the demos that I can't wait to be able to show hands-on is creating a presentation, and being able to reference a
Mhm.
business plan along with a specific customer that I'm working with in a fictitious scenario. But to be
Mhm.
able to reference content and have it automatically consolidate and summarize and merge that content together for me, that is, I love that feature. That's
Mhm.
amazing, and it extends in a
Yeah.
couple of the different Copilot experiences here.
Mhm. Michelle, here's a use case that he's talking about is creating 3 to 5 points to prepare him for a MTR boot camp. And in his role, he's selling Microsoft Teams Room, right? And the latest functionality. He needs to be the latest up to date information. So he focuses on emails and meetings just from the last 3 weeks, right? I don't want out of date data. So like putting that little, almost like constraint on Copilot to say, I'm looking for the latest data in the last 3 weeks. That's really helpful for him. I would say a personal, the prompt that I like the most so far has been, I accidentally did a thumbs up on my camera. The favorite thing that I have done is getting executive summaries and project updates. So as an architect, I'm kind of looking at the bigger picture of like where these different projects are and what our progress is in different programs. So I like asking it to give me an executive summary of a specific project, and I don't want just a paragraph of text. I want a little summary of what the project is about. I want a bulleted list of the key achievements in the past 30 days. I want a bulleted list of the issues and challenges that we're running into. And then I want a bulleted list of what has the team said that they're going to work on for the next month, right? I kind of want that like snapshot in time of where have we been and where are we going. That for me has been just wonderful because it goes across all of my slide decks, all of my emails, all of the meeting updates that I have, and able to kind of like snapshot that into a project or a program update has been powerful in my role specifically. So, should we jump into Word? I saw that
Yeah.
Daryl was saying you better get ready for your, your intro for Word. All right, let's jump in and talk about the first one, which is Copilot in Word.
In this 365 deep dive session, we're going to be talking about Copilot in Microsoft Word. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into the features. We've got a short little sizzle reel video here from Microsoft, which overviews some of the capabilities, and then we're going to talk more about what you're actually seeing here live. So as we dive in, immediately we're in Microsoft Word, and right away Copilot actually pops up for the user. So you're going to see this as part of the experience. It's going to ask you, do you want to get started creating something new, and how it can assist. Well, just a simple prompt, a simple a request using natural language. It's going to go ahead and actually start generating content for you. you can interact with Copilot while you're in the main document itself, but you're also going to be able to interact with Copilot through the Copilot panel that shows up on
Hmm.
the right-hand side of the screen, and you activate that with the Copilot option that is up in the ribbon. Now, this particular video is publicly available. This is from Microsoft's website. And notice that the Copilot logo is actually using the logo from a few weeks ago. It hasn't been updated to reflect the new
Yeah.
logo, but it's still the Copilot service. So we got the Copilot panel. Unless I know of another phrase to refer to that as, it's going to be the Copilot panel moving forward. So two different
Hmm.
ways that we're going to be able to interact inside of the presentation. We can go
Yeah.
ahead and
I
walk
want
through it. We'll
to
talk a little bit more about it.
roll back a little bit and point out that this is something that you're going to do a lot in Copilot for Word and PowerPoint, for that matter, and Chat, is referencing files and people and meetings and things like that. You do that with the slash command. So you'll
Mhm.
do a forward slash to start searching for data. And you can see in this example that they are searching for notes, right? They want a proposal and they want to leverage some notes, and they want to mention a roadmap that they already have in Word as well. So being able to pull in right resources to say, okay, the graph is like ridiculous. I want to kind of like narrow it down and narrow my focus to, I know where the good data is. So focus on these items. So I wanted to point that out, is you're able to reference things so that you get more relevant results out of that. I'll go ahead and hit play again for you, Andy.
So we've created the draft. Now we can use the Copilot panel and we can continue to work with the content that's there. We can continue to build out the actual document. Now we might do some of this by hand. We might go and insert the images that we want by using the insert tab up at the top, but you can actually do that through the Copilot panel along the side. But not only are we able to work within that and add content to it, but we can also use that to go back and reformat the content. We can change
Hmm.
the tone. We can change the language that's being used inside the document. We can summarize a complex section, maybe turn it into bullet points so that the readability is easier for whoever's going back and reviewing that later. And we can do that through the Copilot panel, but you can also do that in the body of the document as well. If you were to add your cursor to the body of the document, a panel is going to pop up and Copilot's going to be available right from there. And it's going to have a
Hmm.
Copilot prompt panel and ask you what you want to do. If you highlight existing content inside of there, you can use Copilot to rewrite it or maybe reformat it in a table format if you want. And then in this particular screenshot, if you look in the lower right-hand corner, we've got for lack of a better term, we've got the Copilot pixie dust, the Copilot sparkles, the
Yeah.
Copilot magic icon there. We're going to come up with something clever to call that. I'm going to call it the Copilot pixie dust for now, just because that makes me laugh. But
Yeah,
when you
these
click on
diamonds
that, it
mean
opens up.
AI to me across every application, not even just Microsoft. If you see those little sparkles, that means like some magic robot is doing something with AI.
I'll be honest with you. In the
Yeah.
Microsoft world, for the longest time, we've joked about, the meatball menu and the waffle icon and the hamburger menu. For me, that's kind of like the Salt Bay
Hmm.
menu right over there because it looks like grains of salt. But we'll
It
figure
does.
out a clever food name for it. That's the magic spice, the essence that we want to add
Hmm.
to this. But when you click on that menu, it gives you a few additional commands that you're going to be able to work with. So as you're working on the document, the biggest thing is all the way back at the very beginning.
Hmm.
Copilot can get you over the blank page. It can help you start from something that is existing, the content that you've already collected, whether it's an email in Outlook, whether it's notes in your OneNote, whether it's a document that you
Hmm.
previously drafted. And the last thing I want to point out about that is that the content needs to be in the Microsoft ecosystem. It needs to be in OneDrive, Teams, SharePoint, and Outlook in order for Copilot to be able to go back and find it. And then you've got a starting point where you can draw inspiration and then massage it, and through the Copilot panel and even in the body of the document, be able to work with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Daryl has a question here that's, wait a second, is the panel going to pop up every time I put my cursor next to text? To answer that, that is not going to happen. So it's not going to be constantly like coming out and going away,
This
coming
is
out and
not
going away.
Clippy.
No, what he means is when you put your cursor like over here, next to it in that white space, you're going to see a Copilot icon right there that you can click on, and it will open up like an intelligent thing where if you had text selected, the little Copilot icon in the left-hand side is going to say, do you want to summarize? Do you want to rewrite this? It's going to give you like that type of thing. If you put it in empty space, then when you click on the Copilot icon, it's going to ask you what you want to draft content in that white space. So it's not going to, be like constantly coming up and moving your view around. It's a little like kind of like a little helper in the side.
Now that's for the side panel. In the body, like if
Mm-hmm.
you go back to the beginning of the document, the beginning of the video
Uh-huh.
there,
Yeah.
that thing right there, if you
Mm-hmm.
click into like outside of a paragraph and you click into the white space of the body itself, that does tend to pop up when the cursor engages with the document. So this
Mm-hmm.
thing right here, you'll see it when the document first opens up, and then if you go into the white space between like the pricing paragraph and then the
Mm-hmm.
topic down below it, it does pop up there as well.
Yeah.
You see, like at the bottom, that's one other thing to point out. Can you go back to that part where it said keep it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
right
like
here.
right there. Once it generates something, you have the option to keep it. They've even updated this a little bit to adjust it, to regenerate. And what I'm seeing
Mm-hmm.
now is it actually gives you a couple of different drafts to review. So if you've got like a small paragraph, it'll give you 2 or 3 different versions of that for you to kind of pick and choose what you want.
Yeah. Scroll
And
back.
full disclaimer, you should pay attention to the actual content that's there and check it for accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
They will put that all over the product. You'll see it everywhere, but you need to verify that the content is actually what you're looking for, and it's being generated with the message that you're actually trying to send there. So don't just depend on it. Make sure you fact check it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's look at the slides that we have about this here. So to recap that a little bit, you can draft content, you can adjust or kind of augment your content to make it a little bit better, or kind of, massage it a little bit. Like, I don't want this, I want it in a different format, like bullet points or a table or something like that. You can create that way. And then where's some other pictures here? So this shows summarizing the content. And now this is, yeah, so this must be a more up to date. You got the new icon right there. But yeah, if you open up a document that's already been created, you can just consume it as you normally would. Or if you invoke that Copilot pane on the right-hand side, then you can ask it to summarize. And this summarization is like one of those pre-provided prompts for you. You'll see it up here at the top as a suggestion, or if you click the sparkle down at the bottom, one of those like recommended prompts will tell you, hey, do you want to summarize this? You click summarize and it starts giving you those main ideas. It formats it nicely in some bullet points. It's kind of easy to skim. You also can give it more detail if you say summarize this document and give me the top 10 things or the top 5 things. You can give it a little bit more coaching. That's called prompt engineering, where you can tell it what format you want, how much of it you want, things like that. Something that I'm kind of honing in on, like my own little analogy of what prompt engineering is like for me. And I like to describe prompt engineering like this. I have 3 kids at home, 3 small children. If I tell them to unload the dishwasher and I just say that, they're going to do who knows what with the dishes, right? They're going to just pull out the dishes and leave them on the counter for all I know, or leave them on the floor. So what I've got to do is say, please unload the dishwasher and put the plates in the cabinet above the sink put the silverware in the silverware drawer. I need you to separate the silverware by forks, spoons, and knives. You got to give that level of detail sometimes when you're talking to generative AI. You want to tell it exactly what you want to do, and don't assume that it can just infer what you want based off of a short, like, summarize this. Chances are you're going to get a better output if you give it a more clear definition of what you want. So summarize this document could be a little bit dangerous because you might want something a little bit different. Keep in mind you can add that to your prompt as well.
So along those lines, Microsoft does have some publicly available information around some of the prompting
Yeah.
guidelines. And the four main things that they're recommending is you give it a goal. What do you expect from Copilot? You provide a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
context. You give it a source. What should it pull from? And then you set the expectations. You need to think of it as a conversation and know the first time you ask it for something is not necessarily the end result that you actually want. So you say,
Mm-hmm.
summarize this document, we get 4 bullet points, but those 4 bullet points might not be all encompassing, or they might be a little wordy. So then you could say, okay, summarize this document and be a little bit more concise with the
Mm-hmm.
response, or divide it up into a couple of subtopics. And
Yeah.
you're going to be conversing against it to get those responses back.
Yeah. I want to share this a little bit. We'll put this in the chat, but at Work Lab they had the art and science of working with AI. This is what Andy was talking about. Is this kind of like anatomy of a prompt? Start with the end in mind, then moving on, set the stage, give it that context that you're looking for. That could be referencing a file or something like that, or referencing a person. Then define the parameters, tell it, like, what samples, or, use this for inspiration, stuff like that. And then tailor how you want it to be. I want this as a table. I want this as bullet points with headers, things like that. So this can really help you kind of like generate those good responses, or those good prompts. I'll put that in the chat for you guys. Yes, Work Lab rocks. I love the Work Lab. Definitely subscribe to that podcast and the RSS for that, because they have some gold in those posts. So yeah, Copilot is like a 6 to 10 year old child. You have to act like you're, giving it very specific instructions about what you want. So we might have gotten ahead of ourselves a little bit as diving into prompt engineering and things
Yeah.
like that. So what
Well,
else do we want to
that's
talk
also
about here?
that's also something to keep in mind. There are
Mm-hmm.
guardrails against that you need to stay within. Rather, there are guardrails you need to stay within.
Mm-hmm.
You can try to do the type of prompt engineering that you see people doing on social media. It's not going to work necessarily here in the Microsoft Copilot world. There are things
Mm-hmm.
that it can do and can't do. We'll show you the service description in just a moment. But what you see here are some core capabilities. Help me to get started, create something from something that's already existing, consolidate a few
Mm-hmm.
things, merge them together, give me something to work with from there. Summarize this document, summarize with bullet points, make more concise, rewrite this section, make it more readable. Those are the things that it does really well. And those are the things that it excels at today. And it's a service that's very much in its infancy, and it's going to grow. So if you approach it like that, if you approach it like you're talking to a 6-year-old and you set those expectations, then you're going to have a lot of success in working with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here is the service description from Microsoft Learn, or learn.microsoft.com. And we'll put the link for this in the chat too. But you're able to write and summarize, get draft content. Remember, it can be usefully wrong. So, you need to verify for accuracy, things like that. It can add context, so it can rewrite things. It can expand upon ideas, summarize documents for you, stuff like that. It can understand the tone of it, if it's more casual, more professional, something like that. And then you you can kind of like play devil's advocate with it a little bit, and say, "Oh, what am I missing here?" Or, give me a contrarian's perspective on what this document is talking about. You can kind of like role play with it a little bit as well, which is pretty cool. Okay. Copilot in Excel.
So in this section of 365 Deep Dive, we're going to be talking about Copilot in Microsoft Excel.
Oh, let me mute
So as we
that.
begin our Excel journey, I think one of the things that it's important to point out is that it's going to work with table formatted data. That's where you're really going to get the best Excel experience out of it. So working with table-based data inside of there. Much like we saw in Copilot for Word, in Copilot for Excel, we've got the Copilot panel that opens up along the side that allows us to interact with the data inside of the workbook. As far as the capabilities here, you're going to be able to do things like have it to identify insights. It's actually really good at doing that, breaking down insights in that table, and identifying trends that you might not immediately see just parsing through raw numbers. You're going to be able to have it work with things like time frames. So, for example, one of the things in the sidebar you see over there is change from quarters to months. It can do things like that really, really quickly versus if you were to try to do some of that, it would be much more timely or time consuming rather for you to be able to do that. And then once it starts interacting with that data, you're going to be able to do things like insert visualizations, charts of varying kinds. And I think what they've done a really good job of is working with the machine learning and analytics on the back end from years and years of experience working with Excel. And it knows intelligently what format to present that data back to you in a visualization. It knows how to help you conditionally format data because it's got all those years of learning on the back end, all those best practices. For years, I've referred to there's a couple of visualization guides that Microsoft has that are really good. I've presented those or shared those in trainings, and this is going to do a lot of that for you. And so you don't necessarily have to go and find that style guide to do that. And it's really going to help with that.
Yeah, three things that I think is really cool about Copilot in Excel. And I have to admit, I am not an Excel power user. I don't use it very often. I kind of use it begrudgingly when I have to be honest. I know people, especially in my organization, would be like, "What? Excel isn't the most amazing tool you've ever used?" Because we're in a huge Excel shop. But three things that I think are great are one, getting visualizations that I may not know how to do because I don't use Excel that much, getting visualizations and getting pivot tables because I always have to like look up a YouTube video about how to make a pivot table because I do it so infrequently. So that would be like the first thing is doing things in Excel I don't know how to do. The second one is getting those visualizations or being able to do that conditional formatting. You can see right here where it's doing, I'm going to pause that. It's doing a color coding visualization that I could do that myself, but again, it's going to speed that up a little bit. And then that third thing, which is creating a model, like, okay, I've got the data from what happened last year. What if I made this one little change? What might it look like next year? Being able to kind of like role play or like forecast and do things like that, I think is really, really powerful because you can see theoretically, what if I made this change or that change to my strategy? How does that affect the numbers for me? So I think that's a really cool ability right there to be able to kind of look into the future a little bit and kind of have that safe place to do some modeling, stuff like that. So those are my three favorite things in Excel. Andy, have you used Excel Copilot all that much before? Or are you kind of in the same boat as me?
I'll tell you one of the things that I have used it for, and this is really helpful for me, and that's working with formulas and expressions. It's actually really
Mm,
helpful for working with some of that. Full disclosure, I've used it with my fantasy baseball league and my fantasy football league. As we were getting toward the playoffs in the fantasy baseball league, that was helping me to identify trends over the last like
nice.
3 to 6 weeks, which in some services is not always available. So I was able to
Is it
pull
giving
in.
you a leg up, you
Yeah,
think?
exactly. Like when like I play in ESPN leagues, and those leagues, it
Mm,
gives you a total score, but it doesn't break it down like in baseball of batting scoring versus like pitching statistics. It just puts it into one big bucket. And I needed to be able to break that up into two buckets. I wanted to know hitting wise how I was doing, and then pitching wise how I was doing compared to the rest of the league. So I was able to
mhm,
create an Excel workbook and import the standings, and the standings actually had all the information for hitters and for pitchers in one table. So I put that
mhm.
in one table, and then it had the total column, and then I created a second table side by side with that, and I inputted our scoring metrics, and then I was able to get Copilot to help me to based off of the scoring metrics create scoring that broke down hitting versus pitching. And then I was able to see, okay, hitting wise, how do I compare to some of the other teams, and pitching wise, how do I compare to some of the other teams? And then I was able to gain a little bit more insight into that. That was a fun experiment for me, and it was helping me to create and generate some of those formulas and expressions, which in this case, we do. I think we have 8 hitting categories and 7 or 8 pitching categories, and each one's weighed a little bit differently or weighted a little bit differently. It was able to help me to do that with it's kind of a nested formula, and so it got pretty complex. So it was able to help me figure that out and the syntax along with it, and that was really cool.
Yeah. Okay, so to kind of, break down what Excel Copilot or Copilot in Excel is kind of the branding that you're going with at this time. It's some ideas are breaking down sales by channel, asking questions about your data. What are the key trends? What are the things that you think are contributing to, an increase in sales, a decrease in sales, whatever. Stuff like that, reformatting the data into other visuals. That's something that has been helpful to me over the past couple months, here and there, creating charts that you may not know necessarily how to create, or kind of like a pain in the neck to create. You can ask it to create those for you. And you can also have it, tell you what is the best way to visualize this data. That's something I struggle with, is like, should this be bar chart, or should this be a line graph or a pie chart? Copilot kind of help you with like the best way to visualize as well, which is pretty cool. The feature description for this, again, from learn.microsoft.com, is that you can query data in natural language. You don't have to, think in terms of formulas. You can reveal those like insights, correlations, do those what if scenarios, that kind of modeling that I talked about, generating models based on questions. What if I change this? What if I change that? How does it affect the data? And then again, create those visualizations, ask for recommendations, stuff like that. So, anything else? Let's see here. Fairy Geek Mother has a question that is, for those with licenses, will Copilot replace the current functionality like data and Excel, designer, stuff like that? From what I've seen, no, it doesn't replace any of those other features. My like PowerPoint Designer, it kind of augments PowerPoint Designer for me, right? I can do PowerPoint Designer without Copilot, or I can ask Copilot to draft some slides for me, and it leverages Designer as kind of its engine to create the layout. So I haven't seen anywhere where it's going to replace functionality. I've just seen where it's going to add to it.
Yeah, and I would second that. It doesn't take anything away from the application. It just gives you a new way to interact with those features and those functionalities using the
Hmm.
Copilot tool and natural language. Sometimes it's easier for a user to say, "Hey, can you just highlight all of these things that are above this
Hmm.
threshold in green?" versus trying to figure out how to do the formula. If you know how to do it, you can still go in there and do it. This just gives you a way to ask it to do that. without having to have all of that in-depth knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. All right, you ready to move on?
I think we got, hold on, there's one more down there. Let me just read that real quick.
Daryl. Yeah, Daryl, I agree. I don't have the skill to to fact check a lot of the numbers either to understand, is it hallucinating or not? That's something where this isn't going to replace people, right? Like you need to have the skills to know if it is going wildly out of bounds or not. You need to understand the data. Like going back to Microsoft Word, draft me something about a topic. I need to understand that topic enough to know if it's giving me nonsense or not. So like you still have to have these soft skills and understand what you're doing and not just fully trust it to do that. So that's a good thing to point out, Daryl, for sure. Okay, so why don't we move into an app that we're more familiar with? I use PowerPoint all day, every day. I feel like I live in PowerPoint. So this is more in our wheelhouse a little bit. I'll go ahead and hit play for us.
So in this section, we're going to be talking about Copilot in Microsoft PowerPoint. Copilot in PowerPoint is going to help you get over the blank slide starting point. You can actually go in and start generating a presentation based off of an existing document. So for example, if you have a proposal that you've already drawn up, the Copilot application is going to be able to go ahead and start building out a PowerPoint presentation for you, including a number of different slides, content within those slides based off of the document that it's pulling in from. But it's also going to try to intelligently add a theme to that, as well as visualizations to support that. Now, this is the starting point. This is to show you the art of what is possible. You don't have to leave it in the form that it actually gives it to you. But taking that deck and having 8 or 10 slides to start from gets you over that initial barrier, and then it's just a matter of let's clean it up and polish it, let's add in the information that we want, and then start to visualize it. But I think we both know that when we are deeply invested in the world of PowerPoint, we want a whole lot of control over everything from the theme to the visualizations to the fonts to the way that information is presented to the storytelling aspect of that. They try to implement some of that based off of all of the research and all of the telemetry that the PowerPoint engineering teams have. So this is that starting point, but it is possible to do more. So when you're in here, you're going to be able to use the Copilot panel to do things like add an additional slide. And not only can you tell it to add a slide, but you can tell it to go ahead and populate it with content. Add a slide about this specific topic and go ahead and drop that into my presentation. Or this slide is too wordy. Can you make it less wordy? Can you make it unlike Andy and get to the point? Can you insert this image or replace this image with another image? Can you copy the style from a previous presentation and go ahead and add that? And one other thing I want to point out on this particular part of the video as well, it will populate your notes as it's building it. And I think that's really helpful, especially if you deliver presentations and you use the notes feed inside of there. So not only will it build that that presentation and get you started, but it will also populate the notes as well for the speakers. So those things are really, really cool. Now, John, what's your experience like as you've been working with PowerPoint and generating some content there?
Yeah, so for me, I think what a lot of people are going to really like about Copilot in PowerPoint is this initial area. I don't think it's going to make all of us lazy slide designers because from what I've seen, I think a lot of people are going to get the output and be like, maybe I'll tweak this or tweak that, or maybe it's not quite the image that I was looking for or something like that, because you have in your mind the story that you want to tell, right? And I think it's going to take some repetitions and some experience to get what is in your mind, the story you want to tell, into a prompt that gets you what you want. I think this is where prompt engineering is going to be one of those like mastery level skills whenever you come to PowerPoint. But I think the immediate benefit is starting with a blank slide deck and saying, hey, Copilot, I need to give a talk about this subject. And I want to make sure that I hit these points, but I don't really know like the flow of what I want to do. Copilot, I think, is going to really help with giving you the structure of what your talk should be about. You know, if you kind of don't know where to start, I usually start out with an outline, and that's probably what takes the most amount of time, in my opinion, to create a presentation is what do I want to talk about and what order do I want to talk about it? And Copilot, what I've seen is that it helps kind of like fast track that ordering of things for me to where I may just make small tweaks, but generally kind of accept like, oh, I like that flow. Then I go slide by slide and make it, you know, my story, my vision, my visuals, things like that. So Daryl has a question here that's, is it going to respect the corporate template? At least right now, from what I've seen, no. It uses those PowerPoint designer type of templates where it's going to say, hey, here's some what designer says is beneficial for you. And hopefully we'll be able to, you know, get a little bit more like, I have an organizational asset library. I want to use these pictures. I want to use those. Right now, no, it's about what you get from PowerPoint designer. I don't know, Andy, if you know more about the public roadmap and where they're headed with that. My organization, we don't have the org asset library set up yet, so we haven't been able to experience that if it's possible.
Yeah, I don't have any more information on organizational templates and look and feel to add to the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to point out, though, as you know, kind of on this same lines, big picture.
Mm-hmm.
What's it going to do? So you can create a new presentation, and as we see here, it does try to build it and use the designer tool to give it a certain look and feel. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I think is really cool is in the side panel over there. It can summarize the entire thing. So we
Mm-hmm.
talked about it from, hey, here's an outline or a proposal that I had over here as a Word document. Generate a presentation, but it can also go the other way. You can go in and say, summarize this presentation and
Mm-hmm.
give me, bullet points around these 30 slides that are in it. And I think that's actually really, really helpful, especially for like larger decks or like
Yeah.
I'm going back to review something later. That could be an outline that maybe I turn into a blog post, or maybe I turn into a proposal, or maybe I turn into a longer form document. But it can also help you to
Mm-hmm.
organize the presentation. You can have it to organize and reorganize and move the slides around, and then you can go back and you can polish it by having it use designer, create some themes, help you with
Mm-hmm.
some images, change some images around, um, and work with it. What I like to see is to be able to go in and use things like Bing Chat and the Dolly 3 integration and have it generate images and put those in the body of the presentation. I think that would be a really cool feature, and I'd like to be able to do that in the future. So that would be really cool to see something like that. But from the content generation piece, and to go back to
Mm-hmm.
Daryl's question, I don't have any specific information around whether organizational templates are going to be respected. I think they would, but that might be
Mm-hmm.
something that's going to be a little bit further down the road.
Yeah. Pete mentioned also the new brand center that's been talked about that might have an impact too. That might be something that aligns more with like they kind of intersect at the same time. So it may leverage that a little bit more than kind of the way
Mhm.
it's been done traditionally. I don't know. I don't have insight into that yet. I suspect that we're going to see some announcements coming out over the coming months about some of these things that answer some of those questions, like Daryl mentioned, like, yeah, but can I do this or can I do that specific thing? I bet we're going to see a lot of kind of follow-on announcements that might address some of those things. I really like this idea from Daryl that was imagine the coach, the presentation coach, like imagine that not only giving you scores and what you know, things like your pace and filler words and stuff like that, but what if it knows the content enough that it can also give you tips about what you missed or what you spent too much time on, something like that. I haven't heard anything at all about how the coach might get better, but I'm just throwing that out into the universe. If somebody from Microsoft ever sees that, more AI powered coaching, that's a really cool idea from Daryl here about,
Hey, that's
adding notes and stuff like that would be really cool output to kind of like make your presentation better rather than just scoring you on your delivery.
we heard it here first, folks. Copilot coach. Daryl was the one that threw that idea out
Yeah,
there.
million
I too
dollar
think that
idea.
that would actually be really cool.
Yeah.
As far as from a service description uh, standpoint, you can transform written documents into the decks, and as we saw, speaker notes and sources. That's all really, really helpful.
Hmm.
I do want to expand on that a little bit, though. We'll talk more about this in a bit, but like we were in Word a little while ago, and we talked about referencing other files. One of the things that I've done in Word that's been really fun is to reference other files and say, "Hey, take this." Um, this business summary that I'm working on, and take this pitch deck that I created and combine that into a single document. So um, uh, the fourth coffee shop deck that Microsoft has out there, it's just a template. I took that and combined it with a generic business plan, and it took those two things and built out a business plan and a reference fourth coffee within it. So if you've got a pitch deck, you can
Hmm.
kind of use it going in the other direction. And I just thought that was really cool. We saw it here from Word coming into PowerPoint, but it can also go the other way, which I think is really neat.
Yeah.
We saw you can create a new presentation from a prompt or outline. You can condense presentations. That's really neat. You kind of have to experiment with that a little bit. And then not only with condensing presentations, I do want to expand on that. You can have it get rid of some of the wordiness within a specific slide. You can use it to condense that, turn it into a series of bullet points that's a little bit easier to read. Now, is that going to be like PowerPoint story best practice? Probably not. It still needs that person to be able to parse through that. But it can condense down wordy slides, and it can make it something that's more approachable for the users. And then using the natural language commands to adjust the layouts, reformat the text, and then work with things like animations. I haven't seen the time animations. I experimented with that a little bit, and I didn't get any kind of results with that. It told me that it wasn't possible to work with like animations. So maybe the timing's something I need to go and play around with. But I did
Hmm.
like being able to use natural language. I've heard it's been said that users only use a small percentage of the total number of features that are actually built into PowerPoint. There's hundreds of features there, and most end users only use a few of them. And even as I would consider myself a PowerPoint power user. I use the mess out of it, and I try to
Hmm.
do some really cool things with it. I think beyond really what it was designed for. Sometimes I don't know where the menu is to find that command. It's buried down deep somewhere, and so being able to just go to Copilot and say, "Hey, I'm trying to do this," and have it work with me, that's going to save a whole lot of time. And I think it's also going to help a lot of users to approach PowerPoint and do some more advanced things.
Hmm. Yeah. Another thing to not, skip over as well is this isn't listed in here yet, but just that summarization as well. The service description kind of focuses a lot uh, on like creating
Hmm.
stuff. But if you get sent a slide deck that is just like 100 slides, you don't know what to do with it, make sense of it. You can ask questions of your slide decks, and you can,
Yeah.
say, what is this about? What are the key themes? What do I need to do about it? Why should I care? Those types of things. Copilot is great about that for things that are sent to you. So again, kind of that, am I creating or am I consuming? Think of those kind of two C words whenever you're dealing with Copilot. So cool. All right. Moving on. Let's talk about email. We're getting into more of the collaboration aspects of things.
So in this section, we're going to be talking about Copilot in Microsoft Outlook. With Copilot in Outlook, you're going to be able to start drafting a response to a message inside of your inbox. You're also going to be able to draft a new message right from there. Additionally, some of the really cool features is to be able to catch up on a conversation. So maybe there's a threaded conversation going back and forth amongst some teammates. You're going to be able to use Copilot to go and get you caught up on that conversation, to identify key takeaways and action items inside of there, and to summarize that into something that's a little bit more digestible.
Hmm.
Additionally, it's going to present it back to you in a couple of different formats, and you're going to be able to kind of pick not only how you want to see it, but if you're generating a response, you're also going to be able to provide some parameters around that. For example, being able to determine whether your response is going to be short, medium, or long form, but also the type of the tone that you want to respond back with. That being
Hmm.
said, as we're looking at this, I'm not sure that my boss wants me to respond in the format of a poem. I'll try it and I'll let you know
I
how it goes.
have done it a couple times.
Create a haiku about what I did this week and the key takeaways. We'll see how that lands in the organization. I think that will be more for maybe some fun interacting within the team, but to be able to
Yeah.
change the tone and the writing style, I think that's something that carries across Copilot, not only in
Hmm.
Outlook but across all the various Copilot services, to be able to identify a certain tone and how you want to be able to respond.
Now, something that was announced in this writing style area is at the Surface launch event in at the end of September. Microsoft announced that they're adding another option to this in the future. We haven't seen it yet; it's not available in the EAP, but that's going to be an option called Sound Like Me, where Copilot is going to understand the way that you speak and kind of what your voice is in email, the way that you sign off, what your nickname for yourself is, things like that. And it will sound more like you. So I'm interested to see what that looks, because to be honest, they're a little bit generic. It's a little bit of like what you would get out of like Bing Chat or something like that if you've played with answering emails with Bing Chat. I think it's going to get a lot more realistic sounding when we have that sound like me option. I kind of hope that that is the default when it rolls out, but I haven't seen either way.
I'm really interested to test that feature because I've done some of that with ChatGPT, given it some samples of my writing. I've even given it some samples, a transcript of a presentation that I delivered, and asked it to
Hmm.
do some text analysis. I'm really interested to see how the Sound Like Me
Yeah.
compares to some of the other tools for this. That I think that's going to be a lot of fun to test out.
Yeah. So Daryl has a question here that's like, is that going to add to the LLM or something? Um, from a technical perspective, the way I understand it, absolutely not. The LLM does not learn from anything that users send to the system. So it doesn't learn from, it doesn't retain any of that information. From what I understand, it's going to leverage the graph, and it's going to understand how you speak and what your mannerisms are, things like that, from the graph. And I think it's going to augment your prompt with that. So it's going to be the behind the scenes prompt will be something like reply by saying this, make it a short thing, use this voice where they say these things a lot, and here's kind of the tone that they use. I think it's going to kind of inject that stuff based off of what I believe to be probably the semantic index. So to roll back like 4 months when we talked to Jeremy Chapman, there's an organizational semantic index, and then there's your semantic index. So what I could imagine is that at most potentially how you sound might be part of your own semantic index and then leveraged. But I would imagine it's either doing that or it's just adding it almost as like custom instructions to the prompt itself. But it's not going to learn from and retain that all of your employees sound like all of these different people. That's not going to be part of the LLM itself. So that leads me to Pete's question of like, can I sound like someone else? One, I don't think Microsoft's going to give you a button to do that, because I think that would fall afoul of their responsible AI. But at least in your organization, if the LLM doesn't learn what people sound like, you're not going to be able to say, I want to sound like my director, because it's not going to I don't think it's going to know it. Hopefully it will catch that from a responsible AI perspective,
Now,
because
I was
you don't
reading
want to
Pete's
mimic
question
people.
is, can I make it sound like Pete the pirate and respond in that voice? I would like to test that as well. I haven't had a chance to do
Yeah.
that. So I'll report back and let you know how the
Yeah.
Pete the pirate voice comes out.
Yeah, that could be a little bit of red teaming that you do in your organization as well. It's like, I want to sound like my peer over here, and see if it's like, oh, well, yeah, that person uses a bunch of, things that, that may come across as like bias or something like that. That's something to watch for. So,
So we
yeah, I
have
think there are
guidelines in our
possibilities.
organizations for our email signatures. I think we're going to have some guidelines around the sound like
Uh-huh.
me replies in Outlook.
Yeah, this is great. Sound like me is a little bit scary. Credential hacks, things like that. If you do MFA, go passwordless. You don't have to worry about that quite as much. But yeah, that's another thing. Like, is phishing going to get incredibly good with generative AI? That's a not Copilot topic, but it's kind of an interesting thing to wonder about. Like, oh my gosh, is phishing going to get really good because it's going to actually sound like a person more than it does today? So moving into some of those details there. So you can see this is, whoops, I meant to pause that. You can see that this is that initial draft of starting a new email. You get again that ribbon, kind of similar to Microsoft Word, where you can say, this is what I want to say, this is kind of how I want to say it, and then it gives you that, and you can adjust the tone whenever it generates. You'll see here in a second that you can adjust that and you can regenerate, try again, stuff like that. So that's what the generating content looks like. And then this here, this is that catch up with Copilot. So this is not something that I've seen yet in my own experience. What I've seen, or what we have available to us at GA, is going to be the ability to get a summary of a thread specifically. So if you get, I always get, added to like a 35 email chain all of a sudden at like 3 o'clock in the morning, my time. And I wake up like, what in the world is this? You can get a summary of that. That's what the like out of the box right away capabilities is going to be, is replying to emails, getting summaries, generating drafts of brand new content. And we'll let that play out a little bit right there. So I haven't seen yet the ability to flag items, or get like catch me up on my email from the past week, stuff like that. That type of task we'll get into with M365 Chat. I have used the chat to catch me up on things that are in my mailbox, but I just haven't done it in Outlook quite yet. Anything you want to add, Andy, to this service description?
So with the service description, I think one thing to kind of point out is that there are a couple of different Outlook clients out there. There's the classic Outlook client
Yeah.
for desktop. There's the modern Outlook client for desktop, which is also very similar to Outlook for the web, OWA. And
Mm-hmm.
the experience is going to vary, and it's going to be heavily weighted toward the modern clients. So keep
Mm-hmm.
that in mind as you're working with this. If you're using maybe a classic desktop version of Outlook, you're not necessarily going to see Copilot anytime soon
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
If you are someone who's more web inclined, you're more likely to be able to work with it. And then from there, I think some of the key takeaways, feature wise, the users should be excited about, but also temper those expectations. Is the summary is only going to go back so far? I can't recall exactly how long, how many days back, or how many replies back that the summary for email is going to go. I'll have to double check on the service descriptions with that, but it's not necessarily going to crawl your inbox for the last 3 years. It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
limited to a certain time frame. Um, the ability to respond to an email quickly with a single prompt is great, but there's a meme floating around, and it's like, hey, I got to draft this email. I'm going to use, Copilot to do it. And then somebody gets the email on the other end, and they're like, oh, Yeah, they wrote this with Copilot. So give me a summary and then reply with Copilot. And then you just got, Copilots responding to one another and taking the
Yeah.
person out of the equation. Um,
Robots talking to robots.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
fact check it, actually read and engage it. But it is helpful to, hey, this is a long email thread. Summarize it and tell me what the key bullet points are. And then, ask it a couple of follow up questions and get down into it.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yeah.
then, have some fun with it. But keep in mind, we use this in many cases for professional communication. And I think it's really important to set that standard.
Yeah, personally, I have used the summarization of email threads like crazy. That has been like a superpower for me, to understand long email chains. But I have almost not used the generating drafts at all, because really, like, I want to say things in my own voice. I want to be me, whenever I respond. So I think Sound Like Me might change that for me personally, but I've gotten a lot of use out of summarization, not quite so much use out of generating things. But again, also with Chat GPT or Bard, like Gmail, I haven't been doing that in other apps either as well. So that's just, I guess, I'm old school or something, and that like I like to write my communications, but that's just a little bit of my own experience. So okay, oh boy, you ready to talk teams? This is where there's lots of teams things.
Hope you guys are ready. Here goes a deep
Yeah.
dive.
This is a very exciting part too, though. So, all right.
So, in this section, we're going to be talking about Copilot and Microsoft Teams. Now, Copilot and Teams actually has a few different experiences, whether you're working in chat in a small group, one to one, or a small group. But it's also going to extend into things like your meetings. And that's going to apply to private meetings as well as the channel meetings that you're going to be working with. And even then, Copilot's going to extend into the M365 Copilot is kind of the virtual assistant. So you're going to see a bunch of different Copilot experiences along the way. So some of the core entry points are going to be able to go in and have it work with things like meeting notes that you've generated. And Daryl's really going to love this because it is overlapping with Loop. So Copilot and Loop and being able to interact with those Loop notes that you've
Mm-hmm.
created. So we're going to see Copilot as part of the meeting notes experience, being able to prompt against or query against the meeting notes that were actually generated, identifying those action points and creating new content. But you're also going to be able to use it to do things like summarize the chat and conversation history. You're going to be able to have it go in and catch you up on a meeting that maybe you got to just a few minutes late, recap the meeting so far so you can see what the key points are, find any actionable items inside of that meeting, and then at the end, generate the meeting notes for the attendees of those meetings. And that's going to have details, it's going to have actionable items, and it's going to have key takeaways. And you're going to be able to take that information and pass it forward so attendees can be more engaged in the meeting and not necessarily concentrating on getting down the key points and maybe missing a key point while they're jotting
Mm-hmm.
something down. So they're going to be present in the meeting versus having to be the meeting stenographer. Now we have that, and it's Copilot. But there's a lot in this video to take away. So let's go back and step through some of the various
Yeah.
scenes that we saw here.
Yeah. So some of the things here are showing like the recap. So I would say that if you want to look at the whole life of a meeting, you should think in terms of before, during, and after. What this video doesn't cover is the before side of it. I think that's more of a loop copilot thing. Like, I need some ideas for an agenda, stuff like that. Write me an agenda for the meeting. But we shouldn't just forget about the before. What I want to focus on though is the during and the after. They're showing here the after, and this is one thing that I can put on the hat of like a global organization. You can't make every single meeting. Sometimes it's just at night or early in the morning or something like that. Or heaven forbid we have a conflict. I always have conflicts. Well, if the other people in the meeting are so kind as to record the meeting for you, run the transcription for you, you will be able to get the transcript. You'll be able to go into Copilot on the side right here and ask about the meeting, get a summary, get the key takeaways, stuff like that. So I do want to point out, though, that we're looking at two different things on the screen right now. The first is all of this right here, where it created topics for you. It knows the speakers. It knows the automatically generated notes, not manually generated. This part of the window is Teams Premium, right? So this is what you get for $10 extra per month. If you don't have Teams Premium, you can still use Copilot and the transcript to generate notes, to do things. It's just not going to be quite as like done for you and in this pretty format. So I do want to kind of set expectation right there. If you're not a premium organization, you won't get a lot of this type of stuff. But if you have Copilot, you'll still be able to open up Copilot for the meeting and say, what did I miss? What were the action items? That type of stuff. And it's going to use the transcript for that. So you don't get nothing if you're not premium. You just, you're going to do it conversationally with Copilot. So I do kind of want to point that out. So that's after the
before we
meeting.
exit out of there, can we go
Go
back
ahead.
for just a second?
Yeah.
One other key takeaway, and this is really a key difference. Notice that up at the top, it's chat, details, files, and recap. This tells me that we're in a private meeting. This was a meeting that was scheduled maybe from the Teams calendar, or maybe from chat with a small group, or perhaps it was scheduled from Outlook. So this is a private meeting. The private meeting has that recap tab along the top. That recap tab will show you, in this case, the Teams Premium view of the meeting recap. But if you don't have the premium license, it will show you some notes that were taken in the meeting, and it will show you the transcript. In order for Copilot to be able to work here, the transcript has to be enabled. You have to have the transcript in the meeting, and your organization has to allow transcripts within meetings. So if transcripts are not available, Copilot is not going to work for your meeting, and that's really important to take away. With a private meeting, like we see here, the recap tab is readily available. So we're going to be able to go and use Copilot and ask it questions during the meeting, and we can go to the recap and we can ask it questions after the meeting is actually over. Again, we're in a private meeting. Now, I'm emphasizing private meeting because in testing, I tried this in a channel meeting. I prefer in my organization to use channel meetings because of some limitations around things like retention policies. So we like a lot of channel meetings because it brings people in the team and in the channel into the meeting. We can still send out the invites if we want, but then people on the team can go back to the meetings channel that we've created, and they can get the information, the recording, the transcript after the meeting's over, and we can continue the conversation there. The recap tab is not currently supported in channel meetings, and the Copilot feature only works during the channel meeting. So if the channel meeting is live and the transcription is enabled, I can hit Copilot and I can say, catch me up on the meeting, summarize the meeting, generate meeting notes for me. But as soon as the meeting's over and that transcription is closed, I can't go back and work with Copilot anymore. I can't ask it to go and say, give me a meeting summary, because it won't be able to access that transcript from there. Now, I could probably download the transcript, throw it in Word, and use Copilot over there and do something similar, but that's a lot of manual effort. So there's a difference there between private meetings and the recap and Copilot feature, and channel meetings and the Copilot feature. So I just want to make sure people are aware of that. I hope that's something that Microsoft addresses in the future. And that's feedback that I'll make sure that I provide.
Yeah. So that's the after meeting. Then there's also the during meeting. So remember, before, during, and after. During the meeting, you're going to see Copilot in your U bar or your control bar up here at the top. So again, if it's being transcribed, you see that this is being recorded and transcribed. You're able to open up that Copilot icon, and that's going to slide this pane out during the meeting. And this is wonderful because what you can see here is she's recapping what has happened so far. So you show up 15 minutes late to the meeting. You can ask about, what have we been talking about? Where are we at? And it gives you some of those key takeaways. In my experience, this is amazing. It does it very quickly. It does it very accurately. This is like so awesome that I really hope that whenever you guys start getting Copilot, you'll start really testing it with transcription because it's a superpower type of thing. But you can get a recap, and then also during the meeting, maybe it's not just that you're out, and you showed up late. You can get a sense of like what's the direction that people are going. I view this a little bit as an accessibility type of play, right? Maybe I zone out. Maybe I have some type of attention deficit, something like that, that causes me to like, lose focus. I can ask like, oh, what did I miss? Or, where are we going with this? Maybe I'm a person who has trouble reading people and emotions, things like that. You'll be able to say, hey, are people on board with this? Did we arrive at a decision? That's something that like, even outside of an accessibility need, a lot of times I get to the end of the meeting and it's like, do we even decide on anything? like did we come up with a decision? So at the end of the meeting, you could ask what questions are unresolved. That will be really helpful. And also like, did we arrive at a decision? What decisions were made? And it will give you that type of information that you're looking for. Something that's helpful that I've noticed is it will Copilot will nudge you towards the end of your meeting to say, hey, there's 10 minutes left in your meeting. Why don't you run a recap? That happens when you're transcribing. So I've really been like jazzed about that it reminds me that it exists in the last 10 minutes of the meeting so that I can get a recap, I can do notes, but I can also say like, do we have anything left? Did we not get on something in the agenda? Or what are the key takeaways, so that you can take it and actually do something with the output from the meeting at the end. So I just love the during meeting experience. I can't say enough good things about that one.
I just had a great idea, and I'm gonna have to test it out in a fake meeting maybe this
Yeah.
weekend. But I'm gonna have to see if during the context of the meeting, if we did in fact decide that next Tuesday is also going to be combined with Pete the Pirate Day, and see what the outcome of that's actually going to be.
Okay. So let's go on to the next slide. Let's see are we missing anything in this slide here? So again, that's just deep diving on that particular during meeting experience. And then here's some options. So again, summarizing the meeting. This is something that I've been doing a lot is during the recap of the meeting, it's given me bullet points. And something that I've noticed is whenever I ask for like key takeaways, it will give it to me in a bullet listed format, right? Andy said he was going to do this and he was going to do it by Thursday. Tom said he was going to do this other thing by next week, stuff like that. What I've found more helpful is not only saying summarize the meeting, but I've said the extra summarize the meeting and give me the key actions as a table. And that has really helped me personally to get it as a table because what it does is it auto formats it as here's the task, here's who it's assigned to, and here's the ETA or when it's due. So that just makes it easier for me to read personally. So I want to put that out as like a little pro tip for you. So do you have any like things that have been especially helpful for you during meetings? Have you used it very much during meetings?
Yeah, I've tested it pretty extensively during meetings. That's how I stumbled across the difference between the private meetings and the
Mm-hmm.
channel meetings. For me, the the thing that I like the most, and I mentioned this earlier, is it lets me be present. I don't have to worry about taking the meeting notes. I don't have to worry about the actionable
Yeah.
items and the follow-ups. It does that. I can tell you how many meetings I've had over the last few years where I get to the end of the meeting and I'm like, did I write down everything important? Did we record this? Do I need to go back
Mm-hmm.
and like revisit it? Let me go and find, my OneNote notebook and drill down for it. this streamlines that whole process, so I can just be there, and then at the end, right before it ends, I just say, go ahead and generate meeting notes for me, and it gives me the summary, the key takeaways, and it gives me the action items, and then I can just take that, put it in whatever note source that I want, and then I have that information. That's been the
Yeah.
really helpful thing for me. The other thing that I haven't had a chance to test yet, I'm really looking forward to it, is using this to deliver technical training, using this to deliver a 15-minute or a
Hmm.
30-minute webinar on a Microsoft application. What I want to do is the within the process of this, I want to be go to Copilot and say, okay, um, summarize this or create an outline of this technical training, and then key takeaways, and then use that as a way to follow up with the audience, and extend what I'm able to do delivering content, but also streamline some of that workflow, so I'm not having to do as much of that work manually. If it's able to go and
Hmm.
grab all those key points from that training, and then help me go ahead and draft the follow up communications, that can be a huge time saver for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good idea. I'll have to use that in our onboarding sessions as we start bringing people online. I'll have to try that. I definitely need to mark that down. I need to make sure I transcribe those meetings so that one, I can give people key takeaways and format it that way, but also to demo it live as well. This is something that you're going to have to figure out in your organization what your tolerance is for transcription. That can be a very touchy subject for certain organizations and certain groups of folks. So there might be some cultural things to kind of get over, corporate culture wise, of like, is transcription seen as a bad thing or as a helper in your organization, to understand how much value you might get out of this. But if you can do it, it's pretty awesome. What does this video show here? Okay, so this is diving into the next section, which is about group conversations. We have a whole section on that, don't we?
No, the next section is going to be the M365 chat.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yep.
So we can dive into this then, I guess. So the second thing in Teams, we got meetings as one. The other one is one-on-one chats or group conversations that you have. We're not talking channels. We're talking the chat tab. So we're in the little chat module right here. Inside of that chat area, any of your conversations you have going, whether they're one-on-one or a group conversation, you will have this Copilot button in the top corner. Again, the icon is probably going to change because we've got new logos and things like that. But when you invoke that icon at the very top, you're going to get a little flyout pane that comes out, and you're now asking questions about this particular chat. So, in the context or the confines of this group conversation, I want you to tell me about the past 7 days. I want you to tell me what decisions were made, stuff like this. And this is fantastic for whenever you end up in a situation where like you're in meetings back to back and 3 hours have gone by, but your group chat that you have that's very active, you're like 150 chat messages deep now, and you don't know like how to make sense of it all. You can be like, okay, what did I miss? And it will give you those highlights. What's amazing about that is not only does it give you the highlights, but it will give you the reference points for those particular chat messages. So when you click on a reference, one of this like 2, 3, 4, when you click on that, it's going to jump to that message in the conversation. So you get the context, right? This is very important in a Teams chat where it's like, Maria said this. Maybe I want to know what was said before and after Maria said that. If I click on it, it jumps to that level, and then I can see it in the context of the conversation and get like more than just that one little nugget. I get a little bit more by seeing the content or the context as well. So I wanted to point out that we have kind of, a long history of having difficulty finding things within chats. This does a really good job of jumping you to where it got that information from. So, anything to add on group or one-on-one chats, bud?
Can we go back to the point where it talks about like the prompt the Salt Bay prompt portion of it.
Yeah, this part.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
So the time frames, highlights from the past 7 days, highlights for the last 30 days. If I recall correctly, it is a 30-day limit. It won't go beyond that within the
Okay.
conversation.
Yeah, I didn't know
But if
that.
you have retention policies in place, it's not going to extend beyond the retention policy. If you have a 24-hour retention
Hmm.
policy, it's not going to go back beyond that.
Yeah,
If you have
it's
a
only going to
7 day
give
or
you what
30
you could
day, it's
scroll
not
up
going to
to.
go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's only going to show you that recap essentially beyond that particular point. I haven't had a chance to really test this in depth because I've been testing as a party of one, trying to keep things consolidated to just me within the organization as I'm kind of learning some of the ins and outs of it. But I just wanted to point that particular piece out. Um,
Hmm.
that there are limits to how far back that's actually going to go. But extending one other thing, this does work in the context of group chats. And so if you have really active group chats and you're just not able to, maybe it's interrupting with your focus time, you can put the channel or chat on mute, and then you will be able to go back and catch up and get a highlighter summary and actionable items, and
Yeah.
then engage from there.
Yeah, another thing I want to point out here that it's across most all of Copilot except for Loop Copilot is that it's just for you. So this little reminder that's like, yeah, you're in a chat conversation with other people and you're asking questions on the side. You're the only one who can see what you've been asking and what the outputs are of that. So keep that in mind. Like you're not, if you need a little bit of help or like, what is this person talking about? You're not going to look like a fool in front of everybody, right? Because this is your conversation with your co-pilot. So keep that in mind. That is the exception for that is when you're in Copilot with Loop. So Copilot and Loop, that is the place where you're doing collaborative prompting. So the other people will see what your prompt was. They'll be able to also like add their own to the prompt and stuff like that. But when you're in Teams or Word or Outlook or something like that, no one's going to know what prompt you used in order to generate that draft email, stuff like that. So, um, yeah, we covered the references. We covered this kind of table format. This is again that prompt engineering where tell it the format you want and then it will give you the format that you want, right? You're not like if you just ask like what are the people's roles, it's probably going to give you a big massive text or maybe a bulleted list. Instead, if it's easier for you to consume a table, ask it for a table and it will help you with those types of things. So, very cool. All right, let's get into the service description on this. Again, recap those conversations. What did I miss? Highlight things, key discussions. Did we get to a decision? What are the unanswered questions I need to follow up on? That type of stuff. Catch up on what you missed. Create meeting agendas based on chat history. This is that before the meeting instance where you can say, all right, we're going to have a chat with, or we're going to have a meeting with this group of people. What should I talk about? Right? What are the key things that we're worried about? It can help you create that agenda. Just chat with it over there in the sidebar. And then, who has some action items? When should we check in next? What was our consensus? Ask Copilot that. It will help give you insights into what your meeting result was.
And if you really think about it,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like an administrative assistant in what it's doing in that particular role.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good segue into the next part.
Yep.
So in this section, we're going to be talking about M365 Chat, also known as Microsoft 360 Chat, formerly known as Copilot Preview, formerly known as Business Chat. Yes, this one's been renamed a few times. It's
Yeah.
now M365 Chat. And this is an application that you install through the app bar along the left-hand navigation. And this application is accessible through the chat option inside of Microsoft Teams. This
Mm-hmm.
is the virtual assistant experience. This feature, in my opinion, is the most powerful Copilot feature that Microsoft has released. So we've saved the best for last because
This
this
is what I use
feature
the most.
is
Yeah.
truly the game changer. When you're working with M365 Chat, you can have it in a central spot, a place for a continued conversation. You can have it summarize information. You can have it catch you up on information. You can have it prepare you for an upcoming meeting, provide a recap of a previous meeting. You can have it summarize content that's in the Microsoft Cloud from OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint, as well as Outlook. You can have it um, help you to communicate with other teammates, to summarize conversations that you've had with those teammates. You can have it help you to start drafting new content. This is the closest thing to Iron Man's Jarvis that I have seen yet, and it's called M365 Chat. So you're going to be able to work with it here in Teams Chat, and this is available on the desktop and it's available in the web experience.
And mobile.
Haven't tested it on mobile, but
Yeah,
that's good to know.
because it's just a chat conversation, it's also available on your phone, which means that you can click the little microphone and you can talk to it, which is awesome. Some of the things that you can do here that they're showing is you get the most breadth across the Microsoft graph, right? So it's like, hey, here's some ideas. Let's talk a little bit, Kat. So you could say like, what happened with Fabricam? What happened with a client, a customer that I have? Now it's going to look across your emails, your chats, your meetings that you had, the files you've worked on, and it's going to give you much more rich understanding of what's going on with Fabricam from all of those different sources. And you're going to see a lot of different types of references come in whenever you're talking to M365 Chat. So again, all of this stuff is referenced. It's kind of a lot like Bing Chat. You're used to getting references and things like that. Whenever you drop this down, those references, you're going to see emails. That's with a little email icon. I think I've seen it with an Outlook icon. You're going to get different types of files. So that's going to give you like, whether it's a SharePoint page, that'll give you like a little web icon, or some other like web type of resource, or if it's like a PowerPoint or a Word document, you're going to see where that came from. If you drop down this little caret right here, it's also going to give you like a little snippet of the email and then like where that reference came from. So you can see it in context. You can also click on the reference. It will open up that file, or in this case, an email. It will open up the email inside of Outlook Web Access. So yeah, the references are like the most rich here, the most breadth of references, of resources, stuff like that. So you can see she's getting an update about a client, what happened yesterday. There's the context of that presentation, the context of the email that she got, stuff like that. So you can hone in a little bit on here and say like, okay, Mona is involved. So help me prep for my meeting with Mona. It understands who Mona is, right? Because you're doing a turn-by-turn conversation about this particular subject. So it knows like, okay, I'm talking about this Mona, not some other Mona. And you have 5 emails with her. You agreed on something. She said she was going to follow up about this other item. So now you're prepping for a meeting and kind of moving on with your day. So a lot of stuff within that M365 chat. Here's an example of building strategy within M365 chat. So to mute that in my ear. So following on with that meeting, you can say like, okay, I want to prepare for this meeting still, but I want something else like Q1 proposal or projections for Q1. So it reached out to an Excel spreadsheet and it started pulling that into a consumable condensed version that's just an ad hoc table that says, hey, here's some of the insights from what's deep into that huge Excel spreadsheet that you worked with. And now you've kind of tied the information you've already been chatting with, you've brought in a new resource and added to it so that you're building something new rather than just recapping what already exists. So this is the understanding of like, doing a SWOT analysis. Like, all right, I've brought in more information. Now I want to like get some kind of insight about it. So based on what we know about the client, based on what we know about the performance from this spreadsheet, give me a SWOT analysis. And it can do that. It can give you like, all right, you should focus on these things for strengths. You should, try to mitigate these types of threats, things like that. So that's like working with it and building a strategy, having that conversation. You can have up to 30 turns with a M365 chat message. So you get this kind of building on itself for up to 30 times. And then what you'll do is new chat, and then it'll start over again, and you can talk about something else. So that's another thing to keep in mind when we talk about it going off the rails and hallucinating.
And it
Um,
will tell you in the lower right hand corner that this is turn 2 of 30. This is turn 3 and 4 of 30. And
yeah.
once you go to a new chat, though, you cannot return back to the previous chat. It's
Hmm.
compartmentalized. I wish there were more of a visual indicator to separate that, hey, this is a previous chat and this is like a
Yeah.
new chat. I wish there was a way to kind of like maybe a chat history off to the side, kind of like they're doing in Bing Chat and Bing Chat Enterprise,
Hmm.
just so I can go back and maybe revisit a previous conversation for a little while. I think that would be really interesting. And I'm also really curious to see long-term effects, how retention policy is going to apply to the conversation that I have here. So if I have a
Mm.
conversation with M365 chat, is that going to be subject to a 30-day retention? I'm testing that now. It's going to be a few more weeks before I
Yeah, from
know
my
what's going to
experience,
happen
yes.
there.
It's just a conversation. So,
Yeah.
from what I've seen, yeah, it's going to respect your organization's retention for chats because it's a application chat that you're doing. So, something that's shown right here is something that was announced again at the Surface event back in September. We have not seen this yet, but what I'm excited about is one issue that I have right now with Copilot, or that I've seen from these demos as well, is it feels like you're doing a little bit of context switching, right? Like I want to build a slide outline, for this slide deck that I'm working on. I might do that in chat, but in order to move that into PowerPoint, you have to like go into PowerPoint, open up Copilot, and then create from this outline. What we've seen to kind of smooth that out is Microsoft announced these kind of action buttons inside of the chat where it'll say, oh, well, you want to add a slide or you want to create some slides out of an outline. It's going to intelligently offer, well, let's open it up in PowerPoint, or you write me an email draft to Mona. It will say, well, hey, let's open that up in Outlook, and it will send it over to the place where you're going to keep working. I think that's going to smooth out that kind of like context switching a little bit. So I wanted to call that button out because I'm looking forward to that as well. Yeah, Daryl says, imagine threaded conversations you can go to. That's kind of like something that I miss from Bing Chat to Bing Chat Enterprise. When we all moved over to Bing Chat Enterprise, we lost that chat history, right? The ability to rename our conversations and pick up where we left off. I hope that Microsoft brings that back in some way, that's also compliant with all the governance and the reasons they probably pulled it out at the beginning. Um, I don't know, Andy, if you've heard anything about them bringing chat history back into like a Bing Chat Enterprise.
I have not. I understand why they want to limit that to, a single turn and then, the conversation's gone. But here
Hmm.
I am logged in as an enterprise teammate. I have an enterprise license. I'm subject to the enterprise compliance and
Hmm.
security policies. I've authenticated into the system. I'm using multi-factor authentication. It seems like there's enough barriers in place that I should be able to have the chat history with M365 Chat and be able to go and have part of a conversation here and go to another conversation there and then return back to a previous
Hmm.
conversation. I think all the mechanisms are in place for that. So maybe in the future we'll see that.
Yeah, another comment from Daryl here. Like, imagine it being like Jarvis, where it follows you around the different Copilot experiences. That would be killer too, especially if you're in kind of the GTD or Pomodoro type of way of doing things. Like, where, all right, I am going to work on this thing for the next hour. If Copilot just understood that, right, and the apps that you flip around in, if you didn't have to explain yourself to Copilot again, that would be really cool. Where it just knows, hey, this focus time block on John's calendar is going to focus on this project. and then it just kind of keeps that in mind, that would be amazing. Uh, but I haven't heard anything about something like that. So sorry, Daryl.
And one other thing to point out here, since we're
Hmm.
talking about like feedback, can you go back for in the lower
Yeah.
right hand corner of a response? So like when it generates a response and it pops up on the screen, you're going to see a thumbs up and a
Hmm.
thumbs down. That's how
Yeah.
you as a user are going to be able to provide feedback around that particular response. So you're going to be able, thumbs up or thumbs down, it's going to open up a dialogue and it's going to allow you to provide detailed information around that. You have the
Hmm.
option to allow it to collect some analytics or a screen recording, and then you can send that to Microsoft, and that's just going to help the service to get better. So I do encourage people, as you're using this, to use the thumbs up and thumbs down to provide that feedback, especially if something is not behaving as expected, so that Microsoft gets that information and their engineers are able to go into it. This is the best, one of the best ways to provide feedback. There's also a
Hmm.
separate feedback mechanism. There's a feedback portal that they have available where you can provide feedback. You can upvote other feedback from other individuals. You can report bugs, and you can also suggest features. I highly encourage you to take
Hmm.
advantage of that, because this is a new technology and these ideas are only going to help the product to get better. Reporting the bugs is only going to help it to get better. So please use those feedback mechanisms. I don't even work for Microsoft, but I just want to see it get better. And it's
Yeah.
great out of the gate, but there's room, there's room for improvement in any kind of process. And so using those feedback mechanisms is really important.
Hmm. Yeah. So to speed up a little bit, because we've done 2 hours already. This is one of my favorite features in Copilot, or the things I've used in Copilot personally. I went back. I remember talking about like project updates, right? Give me a summary of something that's going on across the breadth of my 365 experience. This is that example of like draft a summary of what happened in all of these meetings. Or what I mentioned is give me a status update on a project. I want you to go back 30 days and give me like key achievements, give me things to work on for the next 30 days. This is that example inside a business chat. So you're going to be mostly doing that in a business chat, M365 chat type of window, where you're like, all right, give my team an update, write a recap, find this information, that information, kind of move on with it. This is very, very helpful. So I haven't seen that action button though, where it like sends it over to a channel. That's something that came out in that September announcement that they had.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on that as well.
Yeah. So moving back, business chat, or M365 chat is what it's going to be called at general availability. Bringing all that data together, whether it's your email, your chats, your files, loop components, all of those types of things, bringing all of that into a single chat interface. That's the power of having that. That's why I live in it for the majority of the time, is because it has the most access to everything that I have access to. Remember, it respects like what you personally have access to. Doing strategy, coming up with SWOT analysis, getting recommendations, things like that, updating your projects and programs, super, super useful for that type of thing as well. And then on to the service description. Again, you can recap those conversations, catch me up, highlights, stuff like that, and then get answers to specific questions, get agendas, generate agendas, get before the meeting to make your meeting more useful, and then identify those follow-ups, like coming out of a meeting, what can we do to actually get actions out of our meeting and have more productivity on the other side. So, all right, we're at 2 hours. So, Andy, what do you think? You want to come back and circle back into some of these other items when we can demo it? Because I think Loop and Whiteboard, especially, I would like to be able to show it somehow. After GA. So I'm
Right.
wondering if we should continue this on.
Yeah, we're limited on some of the video based content that we have for the remaining apps. So I think it is a good stopping point to kind of circle back
Okay.
to some of the other apps when we can demo. That also keeps us honest and hopefully keeps you coming back, because we
Hmm.
have a lot more to potentially talk about once this goes to GA, and we are
Yeah.
able to demo. I think, like, on the up next agenda, Microsoft
Hmm.
Stream. There's a few announcements around that for things like summarizing videos, being able to ask
Hmm.
questions about that video content, locating people and topics within the context of that. Their roadmap, the Stream roadmap, is just crazy right now with features and content that they want to push out. SharePoint's made a number of announcements. And they've demoed some of
Hmm.
this at various events. But SharePoint, they're talking about the ability to create sites and to create pages and have Copilot assist in that, and then even creating pages from files. I'm really interested to see where that's going to go. Going over to OneDrive real quick, OneDrive working with files with natural language, being able to ask questions and summarize the files that are in your OneDrive. I think M365 Chat does a little bit of that now, but to be able to do it in OneDrive and not have to context switch, kind of having that Copilot experience follow you would be really helpful. In the
Hmm.
Viva world, there's been a number of different announcements there related to how they're going to integrate Copilot. But Viva Engage is one of the ones we have listed here, where they're talking about being able to draft posts with
Hmm.
topic recommendations, working with replies and better answers, and summarizing threads. I'm really
Yeah.
interested in that from a training and user adoption standpoint. We rely heavily on Viva Engage. So if we could leverage
Yeah.
more of our knowledge base and our institutional information and have kind of an intelligent agent functioning in there along with us, that would really streamline our ability to scale and
Hmm.
reach our organization. So I'm really,
Yeah.
really interested to see that.
Yeah. To jump back up a little bit to answer this question that just came in the chat, November 1st is Microsoft Copilot general availability. We're super looking forward to that. It's only a few short days away, and then we'll be able to show a lot more things and talk about that stuff. These items that Andy talked about, what's next, that's going to be more of like, later this year, early next year type of announcements that they've made. There's a public roadmap for Copilot. So if you go to the traditional roadmap that we've got, also Daryl has some Copilot and Loop stuff that we didn't get to yet. So after GA, we're going to show off a lot of this type of functionality, but he's got videos as well. So check out Daryl's channel. I want to end out with just quickly, like in 3 minutes, my day in the life with Copilot and what I've used it for. Because when you get your hands on this, starting maybe next week or into November, what the heck do I do with this? And jumping all the way to like transforming your life and work will never be the same, it's not going to happen on day one, right? So try to think through like what you do, where you can use it throughout your day, and kind of sprinkle Copilot in like Salt Bay. Sprinkle Copilot in where you can. Um, in my own world as an enterprise architect, I do these things in boxes for my job, right? These are the things I need to take care of, I need to keep on top of. But then, the thing that overwhelms me is everything else that's on my plate, right? It's all of the chat messages, it's all the relationships I keep up with, the emails where I've been mentioned, the meetings that I have to attend that are back to back and overlapping. And it's so much that what I have found is an example that I can explain of using Copilot in the real world day to day is this. I hope it inspires you as we kind of end out this segment. Is starting out, I wake up, I get added to a huge email thread, right? 35 emails deep. Now with Copilot, you will be able to summarize that email chain and get started on your day better, get the key topics out of it so that it doesn't slow down your day right off the bat. Whenever you start out your day again, I come and sit down at my desk. I missed a 3 o'clock in the morning meeting because most people I work with are in London. If they happen to transcribe that meeting, try getting action items out of a meeting that you missed, that you couldn't make it to because of a conflict. You're getting ready for your day. Maybe you've got one-on-ones. Try asking Copilot about other people. Hey, what's the latest with Tom? It knows that I work with a gentleman named Tom Crinigan a lot. It will match that up because of the Microsoft Graph, and it will help me prepare for like, what are the outstanding things? What do you owe Tom? Moving on, get a project update. Again, we talked about getting like, what were the achievements? What were the challenges and opportunities moving forward? Try that within the M365 chat. Get some ideation going within Microsoft Loop. Again, that collaborative space, things like that, where when you're in a meeting and you're in Loop, you're going to want to try to like pop Copilot in there and get some ideation going that way. At the end, working with Word and PowerPoint, like, hey, I need a script for this. I don't know the structure of the PowerPoint that I want to build. Help me out with the structure, help me with the blank page. And then to end out the day, ask Copilot about what's going on tomorrow. Kind of use it to spring you into the next day and get you ready with like pre-reads or things that you need to kind of study up on. That's how I've been using it in my day. I hope it inspires you guys as you start getting your hands on it between now and the next time that we talk. So, any words of wisdom you want to add, Andy?
You have a really long day.
Dude, yeah. Usually I wake up to a bunch of stuff from London, you know, and usually I'm sending them a bunch of stuff at the end of my day. So we play tennis that way.
Words of wisdom: keep it within work hours. Separate that family life from that work life. No, I think that was a really good day in the life scenario with Copilot. You're a little bit more mature in it than me. You've had access to it a little bit longer. I'm really looking forward to seeing how I'm going to be able to implement it and maybe streamline some of the stuff that I do. So we'll revisit a day in the life of Andy in the future. So I'll take some inspiration from that. But as we bring it to a close here, we're going to circle back with more Copilot. This is not the end of the Copilot journey for us. I think this is actually just the start. We hope this has been helpful for all of you to kind of provide some insights into what's going on with Copilot, and to be able to prepare as an end user and set those expectations. We're going to try our best to divide this up into some smaller videos, post those on our YouTube channels, and get that information out there. And then once things go GA, we're looking forward to being able to demo and actually show you some of this stuff live as we continue our journey and our learning path with it. I think the best way to learn about this is as a community, and you all have been a really great community for us. So we want to keep the conversation going. I'm going to do my best to go and grab all of the links to all the various resources that we had throughout this presentation and put them on one blog post for you. So you have one-stop shop for all of that information. I've been doing a lot of work around that. So continue the journey with us, follow up with us on social media, share this information. Totally shameless plug. If you happen to be in Chicago next week, I'll be at 365 EduCon. I'm actually delivering a full day workshop on Microsoft Copilot. Really looking forward to doing that. I got a breakout session on Wednesday around Microsoft Copilot. I'll be at the conference all week. I'll be in the Chicago area all week. So if you're there, reach out, say hello. Otherwise, we'll see you here on 365 Deep Dive.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Appreciate it.